This person's a dog.
Beneath the University of North Dakota, there's a tunnel. Dark, narrow, barely lit, and it hides a secret that students whisper, but no one dares fully speak aloud. They say a girl's ghost haunts that tunnel, floating silently in the darkness, forever trapped between life and death. But that tunnel is just one of many haunted places on this campus. There's an old fraternity house where mirrors reflect faces of those who perished decades ago. There's a theater where pianos play themselves at night, and a classroom building where footsteps echo long after everyone's left. Tonight, I'll share with you the chilling legends of UND, the stories that students tell only in whispers. I arrived on campus late in the afternoon. It was a cold autumn evening when I first stepped foot on the campus of the University of North Dakota. The wind whistled sharply, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of dead leaves and distant snow. The old buildings, each shadowed by decades of whispered secrets, seemed to watch me silently as I walked. I wasn't here for classes or research. I was here because someone told me UND was haunted, haunted as hell. As someone who's always been drawn to dark corners and forgotten legends, it was irresistible. My goal was simple: spend a few days on campus, collect the whispers, and find out if the shadows truly had a story to tell. It didn't take long to hear the first ghostly tale. Everyone talked about West Hall, an old dormitory building, once exclusively for male students. But oddly, the most famous ghost haunting its halls was a young girl. Since the 1960s, students had been murmuring about her, a pale, ethereal figure with short black hair. They claimed she floated silently in the tunnels connecting West Hall to Wilkerson Dining Center. Sometimes, terrifyingly, she was described as missing the lower half of her body. Her name? I asked a senior student named Kaylin Knutson, who seemed eager to share. No one knows, she shrugged, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. But we know how she got here. In December of 1962, a blizzard raged across the campus, so fierce it froze the air itself. A young woman, caught in the storm, tried desperately to reach the warmth of West Hall. She was only 60 feet away, just 60 feet, but slipped on ice and froze to death alone in the snow. It happened before they built the tunnels. Now she haunts them, maybe looking for the safety she never found. As Kaylin spoke, her eyes flickered nervously towards the darkened entryway to the tunnel behind us. She hesitated before continuing. I lived here last year, she said softly. My roommates and I had strange things happen constantly. One night, we came back to our locked, empty suite, switched off the lights, and saw something glowing on the wall. It was a smiley face, drawn in phosphorescent ink, floating eerily in the darkness. We called security, thinking someone had broken in, but there was nobody. No signs of entry, nothing. Did it stop? I asked cautiously. She shook her head. A week later, another message appeared. This time, it simply said hi. We never found out who or what left it. Leaving West Hall, I ventured to the next infamous building on campus, Gustafson Hall. The grand old building, constructed in 1908, felt oddly cold despite the thick walls. Originally a fraternity house, it later served as an infirmary during the horrific influenza pandemic of 1918. At that time, Gustafson Hall had become a makeshift hospital filled with dying students. With the university utterly unprepared, the sick languished without proper care. 29 students lost their lives, many within Gustafson's cramped rooms. Today, staff working in Gustafson Hall speak of a presence they've affectionately named Gus. Gus, they say, isn't malicious, just lonely, perhaps trapped by the sadness that once filled these rooms. I met Lynette Kranelka, a professor who'd worked here for years. She recounted a night in 2003 when she was alone in her office, deeply absorbed in her dissertation. I suddenly felt someone touch the back of my neck, gentle but unmistakably real. I turned quickly, but no one was there. Before I could rationalize it, furniture above me began dragging across the floor, violently scraping wood against wood. Terrified, I ran out and never stayed late again. Lynette paused, her face drawn tight with memory. I'm not the only one who's encountered Gus. A custodian years ago told me of a night when his radio, left playing downstairs, suddenly filled with static. When he went to fix it, a young man stood near the radio, facing away. The custodian spoke, and figure slowly faded into nothing. She shivered. He quit the very next day. Next on my journey was the Sigma Alpha Epsilon fraternity house. Behind its lively exterior lay another tragic history. On October 16, 1971, a deadly fire consumed part of the building. 2 students, Pamela Stern and Tony Stein, never made it out. Pam's gentle ghost supposedly watches protectively over women who visit, often glimpsed silently in hallway mirrors. Tony's spirit, though, is more restless. He lingers in the basement, the place where he tragically perished. Fraternity members avoid the basement at night, terrified by sudden, inexplicable noises. I spoke to a fraternity brother, reluctant but curious. I went down there once late at night, just to grab a sandwich. Suddenly, a cupboard weighing 30 pounds unhinged itself and slammed violently against the wall. There was nobody else down there but me. As the sun set, I made my way to one final place for the evening, Burtness Theater, a beloved campus landmark that hid a darker side beneath its charming facade. There are 3 spirits here, Alexandria Weber, the UND History Club's vice president, told me earnestly. 2 unhappy, 1 friendly. The friendly one is Stu, a former student and handyman who died in the 70s. Electrical equipment mysteriously repairs itself, attributed to Stu. The unhappy ones? I asked. She took a breath. One's a woman, always dressed in Victorian gowns. They say she died where Burtness was later built. She's restless, wandering backstage, visible only briefly before vanishing. The third is a vagrant who died in the theater's pit. At night, a piano plays mournfully when nobody's there. I decided to test the stories myself. Alone in the theater that evening, I waited. Hours passed in silence until around midnight the air shifted. Suddenly, from beneath the stage, soft piano notes floated upwards, sad, melancholic, utterly impossible. I left the theater quickly, my heart racing, but there was no denying it now. The legends were more than just legends. My first day at UND had unearthed shadows darker and deeper than I'd imagined. The question was, what other stories were waiting to be uncovered? Little did I know, the most chilling revelation still awaited me. The morning came, pale and hesitant, as if daylight itself feared lingering too long on the grounds of UND. I'd barely slept, haunted by echoes of the mournful piano beneath Burtness Theater. But daylight banished fear, or at least pushed it back into shadowy corners, and I gathered myself for another day exploring the campus's haunted history. My next destination was Gamma Phi Beta, an elegant sorority house whose halls had seen generations of laughter and friendship, but also inexplicable phenomena. The sisters who lived there spoke frequently of Clara, an elusive ghost who seemed tied to the sorority's earliest days. I met a sorority sister named Sarah who recounted her unsettling experiences. Most of the time, Clara's harmless, almost playful. Decorations gently removed from walls, clocks resetting themselves, televisions turning on in the middle of meetings. Sarah paused, her eyes growing serious. But there's another side to her. One night, she continued quietly, my boyfriend stayed over. We were watching a movie downstairs when we heard footsteps, soft at first, then louder, becoming stomps. He went to check, but there was no one. Suddenly, all 5 doors on the 3rd floor slammed shut simultaneously. We both ran out that night. It felt like Claire was angry that a man had invaded her space. Leaving Gamma Phi Beta behind, I turned my attention to perhaps the most peculiar haunting on campus, the J. Lloyd Stone Alumni Center. The building itself was stately, proud, and seemingly ordinary, yet those familiar with it warned me about the 3rd floor ballroom. There, people claimed, lived the ghost of a young Dutch girl. Her footsteps echoed softly late at night, accompanied by a strange rattling of metal clothes hangers inside closets. I spoke to Jacob Rampsa, a student deeply involved with campus history who vividly recalled an incident from 1996 A staff member accidentally locked herself inside one evening. Panicked and alone, she heard hangers begin clanging violently in closets, as if someone or something was furiously rifling through clothing. She fled out a back door and never stayed late again. Jacob looked at me, a quiet certainty in his eyes. Believe what you want. But that woman was never the same after that. The sun was beginning to sink again as I revisited West Hall, this time focusing on a different legend, one decidedly stranger. Students whispered nervously of another haunting on the building's 4th floor, an angry goat. It sounded absurd until you spoke to the people who'd witnessed it. It kicks trash cans, jumps into the elevator. Afterwards, though, the elevator works perfectly, almost as if appeased, laughed a former resident named Tyler. Maybe it's just an old joke, maybe something stranger. As night descended once again, I felt drawn back toward the tunnels connecting West Hall and Wilkerson Dining Center. It was almost as if something, or someone, called softly to me from the depths below. Gathering courage, I stepped into the dimly lit tunnel. The air was oppressive, colder than it should have been, and I could see my breath. Every step echoed painfully loud against the concrete walls. Then I saw her. It wasn't a hallucination or a trick of the mind. This figure was too real, too vivid. She floated silently, hair short and black, eyes hollow and desperate, and most terrifyingly, only her upper body was visible. She drifted towards me, pleading silently with eyes frozen wide with eternal sorrow. I stumbled backward, heart pounding in my throat. But she didn't pursue, didn't harm. She just watched, then faded into nothingness. In that chilling instant, I believed everything I'd been told. When I emerged trembling from the tunnel, the night felt different, darker, heavier somehow. But there was one last place to visit. A place whose grim history overshadowed all others, Gustafson Hall. I approached cautiously, recalling every story I'd heard. I remembered the influenza pandemic of 1918, remembered the suffering and despair. I also remembered Private Dale A. House, who died tragically in the small cloakroom decades later. Inside, the building was quiet, too quiet. Every step I took seemed to reverberate painfully, as if disturbing the delicate balance. Approaching the cloakroom, my breath quickened, palms slick with cold sweat. As I reached for the door, a sound froze me in place. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from directly behind the door. I pulled back sharply. Hello. My voice quivered. No answer, only silence. Summoning courage from depths I didn't know I had, I threw the door open. It was empty. But suddenly, behind me, an ice-cold breeze blew through, carrying with it a voice, distant and mournful, whispering a single word, Gus. I fled Gustafson Hall then, feeling eyes upon me from every dark window. Something about that voice, those footsteps, they echoed in my mind, even as I crossed the campus towards safety. That night, in my hotel room, I couldn't escape the thought of how many students at UND had walked these same paths, how many had seen shadows they could never explain. Perhaps buildings absorb memories, grief, fear, and tragedy, holding onto them tightly, unwilling to let go. UND is haunted not merely by ghosts, but by history itself. Each apparition a whisper, each shadow a memory, replaying endlessly through time. Perhaps places like these remind us that sometimes the past refuses to be forgotten. And maybe, just maybe, we're all only ever a breath away from becoming a part of it ourselves. So, if you ever find yourself walking those dark tunnels beneath West Hall late at night, or passing the grand yet eerie halls of Gustafson, listen carefully. Because you might hear whispers, footsteps, piano notes, drifting from somewhere unseen. And if you do, run. Don't look back. Because once you've seen the shadows of UND, they never let you go.